So you bring up a good point there on the economics of the crop. So there are, in essence, there are three ways that you can monetize growing this, right? You have your stalk, which is composed of two parts. The bast fiber, which is the stringy part, which would be reflective of this material coming up here. So that's the decortication process. When we decorticate the hemp plant, we strip off the stringy bast fiber, and this is used for things like rope, like clothing, like paper. And then what you have is the inner woody part, which is the hurd, which is used for construction materials such as wood, concrete, bioplastics, things along those lines. One thing that isn't talked about very often, at least around these parts, it is out west, but not so much here, is the grain production, the grain heads that you get off of these stalks. Because in the future at 83, we saw heavy grain heads on the top of those plants. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about that because it keeps coming up more and more. I know we have Philip Alberti online with us with University of Wisconsin. Philip's been a big advocate of the grain side of the plant for as long as I've known him. So thank you, Philip, for really informing me over the years on why the benefits of the grain of harvesting the grain would be. Talk a little bit about that. And I know, Mike, you had firsthand experience harvesting one of the crops up in Minnesota that they had actually done the harvesting. Talk a little bit about that and what some of the challenges might be when you really try for that tri-crop.
Yeah. So I think it's super viable. I think we have to really be keeping our eye on the ball on this. I think that the grain has a lot of potential. Machinery is standing in the way right now of effectively pulling grain and pulling fiber off. We were on 430 acres in Minnesota that was a grain variety. I would say maximum height on it was 6 to 7 feet tall. They went in with some equipment that they were hopeful would do the job. That's kind of what spurred an emergency phone call to us and how quick can you get up to us. So we went up there. They had were harvesting grain at the same time that they had asked that we were cutting behind them. Biggest problem with running existing combine with a draper head over it. They basically set it to their highest position. They were cutting at 5 to 6.5 feet in height, pulling the seed off. I think 6.5 feet yet. Somebody smarter than I in the grain side could validate the numbers, but they were pulling off an range of 900 to 1,100 pounds of grain per acre. The problem is that they were on a 40-foot draper head, and the chaff out of the combine made it real challenging on us, or frankly any other piece of equipment, because that
will slide over, take less of a swat.
You would think that we could make that happen, right?
Kind of leads to a question.
Sure.
Talked to my colleagues out in Colorado, and they're growing hemp because of a lot of restrictions.
Yep.
They're getting up to that point. So they're taking seed and then they're just going to silage jabbers, having a bag with something.
Yep.
Is there a market for that?
The more every day I'm understanding, there are more markets being created with guys doing their own version, all going to California. And absolutely. So I was just, prior to this meeting, I was just on a call with a big customer of ours. And we were having the discussion of mechanical decortication versus some different chemical or different ways to get to the end use. I think as we grow thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of acres in this country. Farmers are very innovative. That's one thing I've come to know. They figure things out, and whether they have the equipment or they want to go out and,
Well, this guy admitted to me, he's got a $750,000 silage center sitting there. He told the young people, it's gonna work.
yes.
And then they figured out a way to make it work.
Well, I think that there's markets. Yeah, to your question, there.
Downside, he told me he doesn't like it 30 rows. That's what he's stuck with.
30-inch. Yeah, I mean that's
Because
well, that's on the grain side. You want your rows to be and I guess that goes back to on the custom farming side, kind of dealing with what we.
Yeah, these were what we saw was on 7-inch rows. So the chaff out of the combine is a real concern. For cutting, it's then coming through and as a second pass cutting.
they
Yeah. The problem I see with what they're doing, and I obviously don't know their end product, but they're not readying their hemp. So they have all that wet material now that
They're desperate. Which does not work.
it certainly doesn't. Yeah, I know that process, and that's a pretty scary process
It's
to
a scary process.
if you actually know what desiccating does. It's kills anything living. The biology is absolutely shocked, and any micro nutrient that
Well,
And Steve, on the organic farming side of things, since we're talking the grain side, being that is a food product, it's protein. You cannot. Yeah,
Yeah,
we're only talking organic farming practices there.
I think I would question heavily what that's being used in, but I think there is a method, and there will be equipment. There already is some equipment. I think everybody's trying to validate the equipment comes out of Europe. It is viable. It adds some other elements into the readying process, but there's things that are coming, and I do think this is has the potential to be a free crop, grain or fiber, the vast fiber can all be pulled off of this.
This whole thing out there was born out of necessity.
Right.
It was something told we couldn't have 30,000 acres of 20 speed lines. If they had water for 20,000. What the hell would we do?
Yep.
And that's where I think you're going to see some forage harvester solutions coming online, where it's definitely going to have a much higher cost of capital. But when you're dealing with that level of acreage, when you're dealing with that level of stuff, forage harvester applications with draper heads and ways to silage it out of the field, as opposed to particularly maybe for the plastics industry, I think anybody that's willing to take it in silage form is you're going to see specialty farmers adapting their equipment, like Philip up in Wisconsin. There's a lot of silage outfits, a lot of silage wagons. There's a lot of grain forage harvesters. And I think you'd see specialty markets develop around the plastics industry for that. The concrete or textiles, they're going to want their perfect 24-inch stalks, right? So as like Jared's saying, as we grow further, more and more acreage across the country, I think you'll see segmentation within the fiber community itself in that regard.